So let's start this off with a little bit of your background from how you've come into the position that you're in right now.
One of my highest values in leadership is integrity, and by integrity I mean consistency. Like, I want to know, if I read your book and then I meet you, I really hope it feels the same, that you are aligned with what you believe. A good product with a bad process is a counterfeit win. Businesses they do it all the time. They'll launch a product, but the team is a complete shambles after the product gets launched. That's a bad process. I really believe with all my heart the product doesn't go down if the process gets better. It's hard for me to believe that it would. So why wouldn't we not work on the people part, the process part, the leadership part, so that we can actually celebrate a sustainable win? I believe that every person I come eye to eye with is made in the image of God.
Yes.
That allows me to lead them in a way that's caring and gives them value. There's a calling in me that says, if Jesus loved the local church, then I do too. And I'm going to give it everything I can to make it better. And my unique seat on that is caring for its pastors and leaders.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and we got a special guest in the studio today. I always love doing live recordings, always better energy-wise, right? So this is my friend Tyler Reagin. Tyler is up visiting. We got to play some golf yesterday. Tyler has a unique backstory and has spent the majority of his life in leadership, and a vast majority of that in leading pastors in churches. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. So we're coming on the heels. We're recording this in May. We're in the middle of May, Mental Health Awareness Month. Y'all have been listening to the episodes and hearing the impactful stories. So we're going to release this as a bonus episode in June because Tyler and his partner Josh, the other Josh, we'll say.
Yeah, that's what we call them anyway.
The other Josh are doing a phenomenal job and have a really unique perspective with pastors and helping them make sure they stay on the straight and narrow with their mental health, with their nature, and making sure that they don't fall out of relationship with God and numerous other things. So we're going to talk the gamut, but it's going to be focused on leadership as always. And as this month has gone, it's going to be on mental health. So Tyler, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. This is a great spot.
Yeah. Now that we got it working, we had a little technical snafu, but Tyler's got some friends in production that helped us get this lighting fixed, and we look good. Otherwise, we were going to shoot in the dark.
Yeah. Is it weird that I'm wearing a Georgia sweatshirt in Wisconsin?
No.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, the SEC's cool.
If it was Ohio State, that would be a different
Ohio State would be a different story.
Different scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
And I would say our biggest rival, I would say football-wise, as of late, has been Iowa.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're built very similarly.
Yeah.
So Minnesota has been the classic. I mean, that's the one that's this border state, but Minnesota typically sucks. So we don't worry about them too much. Although PJ Fleck,
guy's been trying to get
he's been trying, and they've actually won a couple against us in the last few years with him. So
he's a good coach.
We'll hopefully turn the tide here with Coach Fickle. But no, Georgia doesn't bother us.
Okay.
No.
Good. Well,
and y'all have been damn good, so
we're trying.
We can't take anything away from a couple-time national champions right now.
Pretty awesome. We went a long stretch, but it's been a good season to say the least.
Yeah, you got to enjoy it.
You do, and I live in Central Florida now, which is all Florida Gator fans. So they don't like us a whole lot right now, but that's okay.
No. I do want to come to the largest cocktail party in the world sometime.
You can't call it that anymore.
What's it called now?
It's just what do they call it? Like, I don't even think they have a real name for it, but that's what it was always known as, is the world's largest cocktail party.
So, well, they got to have a name.
They do, but
just the largest party.
It is so politically correct. It's not even funny. So much so that it doesn't stick with any of us. It's just like Georgia, Florida. That's just what you call it.
Okay. Well, either way, I'm coming down for that party sometime.
Okay,
I got to come experience some SEC football.
Yeah, our mutual friend John Gordon's right there.
Yeah.
He'll host you. He told me he'd host you.
All right, sounds good. I'm in for it. All right, so let's start this off with a little bit of your background from how you've come into the position that you're in right now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Atlanta. That's always been home base, and grew up low middle class, and just honestly, I think I grew up with this mentality of just what's the job, and I'll go work. And I have an education degree from the University of Georgia, so I was going to teach and coach. And in the middle of that, felt called to ministry full time, and it just started kind of pursuing that. Really had an amazing season in college where we were part of a campus ministry similar to what your pastor did here in Madison. But we had it was a group of students that just believed that spiritual awakening could happen on a big secular campus. And 20 years later, that ministry that when we were there started at like 7,500 people has been 1,500 for the last 20 years, which is, on Wednesday nights, very, just a very sending type place where it was like, let's come together, let's believe in this stuff, and then let's see how that moves out. And some names that you would know have come out of there doing national ministry stuff, which is pretty amazing. And so that really started this journey for me of understanding community and what that looks like. And when a community kind of rallies around similar ideology and ideas, it can be pretty powerful. And so my wife and I met there. And then I kind of started this ministry track. I've been a youth pastor, done college ministry, got my degree in Boston, actually, up at Gordon Conwell. And but I always had this little, I think I've always been somewhat natural leader, but I didn't necessarily step into those spaces just because I wanted to lead. It was just more of a natural thing. So much so that, I think I've probably even spent more time just lifting others up, trying to get them. And I love that. It's still my favorite thing to do. But God has given me a position to be able to influence others through the leadership I do. And so for the last, 15 years, worked in the church, but I was doing a lot around the leadership stuff, coaching teams, working with different individuals, mainly in the faith-based space, but with some businesses here and there. And then was given this opportunity in early 2012, 13 to take over what was called Catalyst conferences. And so we did national leadership events. John Maxwell started it. So imagine being handed something that Maxwell started and Andy Stanley and different, speakers that you guys have heard as your main folks. Like what I loved about it too, though, is it wasn't just pastors that would speak. Matter of fact, we didn't have spots for just preaching. That's not who we were. It's not what we did. We were all about next generation and what does it look like to raise up the next generation to be better, even as that the church could be better because of that. And so if you were a great preacher, it didn't necessarily qualify you for speaking at our events. We wanted guys that like a Craig Rochelle, who is a great pastor,
but also a great leader,
unbelievable leader.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to be a great leader, but to communicate, it's a whole nother thing.
Yes.
And so we worked really hard for who are the leaders that not only are great leaders, but can communicate it. Yes. And, you and I were talking offline a little earlier about sometimes you can meet somebody who you've read their stuff or you've whatever, and you're kind of like, you're not my people.
Yeah.
And
you're not what I pay. It's like meeting your hero, and it is all of a sudden that person, like they're not who you envisioned them to be. Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
And one of my highest values in leadership is integrity. And by integrity, I mean consistency. Like I want to know if I read your book and then I meet you, I really hope it feels the same, right?
Yes.
Like that you are aligned with what you believe. And so there's a thing I learned years ago. It's that a good product with a bad process is a counterfeit win. But yet
that's powerful.
Ministries are full of them. Businesses are full of them. And take ministry just for an example. Let's say you pull off an incredible Sunday. Well, as an attendee, you think it's a win, right? It feels like a win. Man, that was amazing. But the team is they can't even be in the room together the next day. That's counterfeit. So although it feels like a win in the moment, it's not sustainable. It's not a long-term win. And businesses they do it all the time. They'll launch a product, but the team is a complete shambles after the product gets launched. That's a bad process. So one of my passions and one of the things I spend my days on is going, I really believe with all my heart the product doesn't go down if the process gets better. It's hard for me to believe that it would. So why would we not work on the people part, the process part, the leadership part, so that we can actually celebrate a sustainable win? So I learned that, years ago. And then when I stepped in to lead even a Catalyst, there was times we would stand up on stage and talk about what healthy leadership looks like. And yet we were struggling to do that behind the scenes sometimes. And so I really fought hard for our team going, hey, if you're going to sit on this circle, you're going to be in this team, we're going to be the best leaders we know. Like that, to me, is a no-brainer. And honestly, we had a lot of people, too, that we had to go, and you're not serving in your local church. That is our audience. And so if you're not invested in it personally, then why would you care about serving these people professionally? And so there was just a little bit of reset there going, hey, if we're going to serve this audience, we have to know our audience. We have to be connected, and it has to matter to us. But man, we'd have people, what I loved is we would bring, the business leaders to the faith community, and they would be like, man, this is unbelievable. Like I've got Malcolm Gladwell and Seth Godin and Simon Sinek and all these voices, Brene Brown, these voices that have been instrumental in our current culture.
Yeah, especially in the business space, reading their books, their talks.
I remember sitting with Simon. Simon's Jewish, and he's kind of a leadership hero for me because I felt like he just understood the next generation in a way that a lot of other writers don't. And I said, Simon, why do you come do this at a Christian event like this? What? And he said, well, Tyler, you and I are the same. I was like, really? What do you mean? He said, we're humanists. We believe in humans. We want the best out of humans. And I thought, man, that's a powerful way to think about it. And it's not even religion connected, right? For me, a little bit is because I believe that every person I come eye to eye with is made in the image of God.
Yes.
That allows me to lead them in a way that's caring and gives them value, right?
Empathetic, yeah. It's interesting. I didn't even know Simon was Jewish, right? Like, he doesn't speak of religion much at all.
No.
And I listened to a lot of it and read of a lot of his stuff.
Yeah.
And not once have I gone, oh, he does believe in God, just differently than I do, right? He's Jewish. Like, that's not even something that I even thought about because it doesn't come across in his work.
It doesn't. And, Patrick Lencioni, who's written 1 million books, he's Catholic. And he is a little more faith forward with the way he talks about it. And our friend John Gordon's the same way. They'll talk about their faith, but it's an interesting thing. I was with Maxwell a few weeks ago, and Maxwell, what he's done his whole career is he's like best friends with the president of Guatemala, right? Like, and they're literally putting values-based teaching in every public school in all of Guatemala. It's unbelievable.
Something that we could use here in the U.S.
It feels like an option.
Nod, wink, wink.
But what's beautiful is what John will do is he'll do a full day of leadership training. And then he'll say to these 10,000 leaders that are in the room, if you're willing, would you come back tomorrow morning? Because I want to tell you the most important part of my leadership journey. And people come back and they come to a faith because John's willing to talk about it. So it's an interesting thing. And
so
again,
he leads through leadership the next day. But that is such an unbelievable sales tactic. I mean, he's so masterful. I mean, think about every piece of copy you've seen on the internet.
Right.
Lately. But if you click here, I'm going to tell you the most important thing.
That's
right. Or he's just saying, if you come back tomorrow, I'm going to tell you the most. And to him, it's authentic.
It is who John is.
Right.
And he's earned the right now to say that to you.
Yeah, absolutely has. He's influenced more than anyone that anyone walking this earth today. Yeah. At least John Maxwell, maybe Tony Robbins. I actually brought that up to someone the other day. Tony Robbins. Yeah. Actually, it was my CPA. We were talking on the podcast yesterday because he works with Tony Robbins. Between Tony Robbins and John Maxwell, if you haven't heard one of those two names, if they haven't influenced you in some certain way, you're probably living under a rock. Yeah. Let's go back to 2012, 2013 when you took over Catalyst. What kind of imposter syndrome did you have at that point, knowing you're taking over John Maxwell's baby? Yeah, and that's the second book I got to write was called Leading Things You Didn't Start. And it really came from that season of going, I don't know where to pull from for this, right? And the original title and the way I like to talk about when I'm coaching teams is you just inherited somebody else's influence. How you steward that influence is your leadership journey and that responsibility. I'll tell you this in full transparency. The first 2 years, I would be introduced. I'd go up on stages, whether it was our events or other events, speaking on behalf of what we do, and I would make fun of it. I would be like, how does this guy grew up the way I grew up, no pedigree for this, no background for this, and now I'm standing and leading all of these leaders. How does a guy do? And I would literally go almost a mocking way, but unintentionally. Kind of self-deprecating. Which is always the case, but unintentionally mocking God's call in my life. I literally would say, I can't believe God would do something like this. It was almost just like, what in the world? I made a 420 on the SAT in English. So writing a leadership book was not necessarily right down the old career path. So, even when I would step into these spaces, I almost had to do it to go, God, I don't know why you did this, right? And God had started working on me a little bit, but my friends started going, hey, you need to stop doing that. And I was like, why?
And they're like, because you're dishonoring God's call in your life. The beautiful thing is that God takes a guy like you in your mind and puts you in position of influence. And what I quickly turn to is thanking God for that. And then stepping in. One of the things I love about the New Testament, every New Testament letter, either Paul, Peter, whoever wrote it, usually will say, especially Paul, he would say, I, Paul, an apostle appointed by God. Man, you get up in front of a stage and say, I'm an apostle appointed by God in this day and age. That's just weird.
Yeah.
But what is beautiful about it, it's
almost
not
blasphemous, people would take it.
It could be, but Paul's not arrogant in that statement. He's confident.
Yes.
And what I love and what I love being around, and I think you probably would say the same, is I love being around confident in their calling leaders that go, this is what I'm called to do.
Yep.
I'm going to step into this. Our friend Jordan, I think, is a guy like that who exudes humility, because confidence isn't arrogance. It doesn't have to be. It can go across that line.
Yeah.
But confidence with humility is one of the most powerful leadership things you can ever be around.
Yeah.
So I would say for me, it was not a easy plug and play. Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm good.
That was 2 years that you were doing that.
It was a long time.
So, 2 years into your journey before your friends called you out.
Yeah.
And now, we're able to identify that imposter syndrome that you're having so that you could go on and lead in a better manner.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I got to do that for about 6-7 years and then left. And about 5 years ago, I've been full-time leadership consulting. I've got 5 or 6 clients, including, I work with a medical device company. So working with a complete sales company, working on how to create better culture, organizational structure. I'm working on a PhD right now in organizational leadership, not because I love being a student, but because it's just more of a calling thing.
Yeah.
And then the biggest piece and part of why we're hanging out is my buddy of mine, we started, the other Josh, not the real Josh, the other Josh.
The other Josh, that's right.
We started a nonprofit to serve specifically pastors and leaders and keep them healthy and keep them in the game. We call it prehab. We're trying to prevent them from having some situations that take them off the rails. And, you and I were talking about this. There's a major collateral damage when a faith leader has a fall. And I had 3 close friends within about a span of 16 months that were pastors commit suicide. And these weren't acquaintances.
Died by suicide.
That's right. Died by suicide. And
I still say it too. It's unconditioning, unlearning of that.
And that's what we said our whole lives, right?
Yep.
And what was hard for me was obviously the whole thing is difficult. There's an isolation that happens in ministry, and truthfully in business too, and entrepreneurs feel it, different folks feel it, but in ministry specifically, because you've signed up for a moral code that's above what most people are gonna, stretch for, or it's just part of the calling. It's part, like any guy that tells me, hey, I want to be in ministry, but I don't know if I believe that whole more, like, well, I'm sorry, like it's what you signed up for. Yeah. Truthfully. The difference is, what are you doing in your life to protect yourself? How in the world? And what I found, man, I remember sitting in seminary classes with professors in their 60s and 70s that couldn't name one good friend they had. My father-in-law, my dad, these people that are in their 70s and 80s that don't have genuinely close friendships. They have a lot of acquaintances.
Define that. I was just going to say that because I think that some people think they have good friendships.
Sure.
But they don't necessarily know how to define that, because what you guys have done is created a safe space for them to talk.
That's right.
And through that, they develop lifelong brothers.
Yep.
Brothers in Christ and brothers in arms. Like, it's one of those things where it's a true deep level. So define acquaintance versus good friend. How would you, and again, this is a subjective, I think, for most people.
But it's real in the sense of, I think a genuine friend is somebody you have to have had some common experience with, whether that's a trip, whether that's, there's a reciprocating desire to be in relationship. The other piece is a safe place to say everything. So what we find is a lot of pastors, the more successful they become, the more isolated they become. Because imagine you start at a church of 300 and you're the lead pastor, and you're coming in, you're great, and you start growing this thing. Now there's 1,000 people at your church. most of your circle day in and day out go to your church. They're your friends. They're on payroll now. You've elevated some of your friends to staff. You're on payroll. Your elders are your job security. So they might be amazing people, and they might even be more than acquaintances for you.
You're kind of politicking to them, though.
You don't have a choice. Like, right. Unless they are the most mature, mentally stable, healthy people that could handle a pastor coming in going.
And I laugh because that's not.
It's not real.
Yeah.
And imagine your pastor of this big enterprise now, of 1,000 people, significant amount of yearly income from tithe and revenue, saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with an addiction to alcohol." Unless, again, they've got an incredible foundation to be able to go, okay, what a lot of them do, because they're highly educated, they're usually very business-minded, they're thinking numbers, they're thinking blocking and tackling. What is this going to look like? What is this going to be like? It's not wrong to think that way. The trick is, I just want to make sure your pastor can say that to somebody. Mm-hmm. And the more we've been in this, doing this for now 3 or 4 years, the more I don't even know if they should go to their elder board yet. They've got to at some point, right? What we're trying to do is go, hey, let's get you in community before you need it. Let's put you in circles with people. And the key for us and why we're seeing success with the community and the safety is that we are very curated, that nobody in your circle is in your world. So let's say you're a pastor from Phoenix of a church of 500, 5,000, whatever. And then I'm in Indiana at a church of 500. You tell me about your elder John and what he just did this week. And I'm going, I don't have an elder named John, but I have Frank. And Frank did the same thing to me 2 years ago. I don't know your world, but I know your world. Does that make sense?
Yep.
In the same way that your masterminds and the way you sit with other entrepreneurs and business leaders, they can connect, although they don't know the players.
Yep. There's
a safety in that. There's a freedom to actually say, when somebody looks at you and goes, man, I had this experience with a parishioner or somebody as a part of our church. Oh my gosh, I had that 3 years ago. What we're watching with these guys is going, okay, somebody does get that I'm not as crazy as it feels sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is once we take them on some sort of shared experience, then the intentional connection monthly, where we've watched and I'm going to get back to hopefully answering your question, but where I watched the solidifying of those relationships is when we take them through the 5-day intensive counseling component.
Yeah, because you're going through a shared experience. Yep.
And you're dealing with trauma. Mm-hmm. When a dude is in your corner because he's picking you up off the floor of you processing real life stuff, and the other, I can't even describe how important this piece is to the puzzle. I don't need anything from you allows for deep friendship.
Wow, do
you see what I mean?
No, I'm sitting here going, wow, because I just had an epiphany as I describe certain things in relationships to people. Remember yesterday when I was telling you about my 40th birthday?
Yeah.
And my wife, so this is the heart of COVID, and I'll spare some of the details, but heart of COVID, I'm stressed. My birthday is June. This was 3 months into the shutdown. I just had to switch our entire business. I had 250 people I'm responsible for. And I'm out on the patio having a bourbon, and my wife, Jenna at the time, was like, what do you need? And I didn't know.
Yeah.
But except I came to an answer, and I said, I need to not be needed. And at first she was offended because it didn't involve her or the kids, and what do you mean you don't need, no. I need to not be responsible for anyone other than myself for a couple days.
Yep.
So it's just super powerful.
It's real.
It's real.
And what I would bet is some of the people in your life that you would call true friends, there's never a point in your mind that there's a motive in that friendship.
Correct.
And it allows you to trust them.
Well, I would say in instances, if they're trying to sell me on going on a boys trip or go out some night or go to a game, sure.
Right.
But in your time of need, there's not there's not a motive.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
And they probably became your friends because there's probably a list of 200 that started in that same road. And out of that 200, there's 10 that have elevated to go, I care about Josh. And Josh only.
Yeah.
Not what Josh does for a living, not what Josh could do for me, not where, if I can stay at his place, not can he help me with financial investments, not, now some of that might happen because of the trust in the relationship.
Yeah.
But you know that the relationship is not built on
foundation was built separately. What just occurred to me as well as you were talking about pastors, because they have so much influence as the leader, they're not a leader, they are the leader of a congregation. This is what happened to me when I took over the financial firm. I was a part of the financial firm as a leader. As soon as I became the leader, every relationship changed. Like it became recontracted. In that instant that I signed the contract to take over the firm, become the managing partner and the owner of the firm, I was no longer a leader. I was no longer one of the boys. I was now the leader. And even though I didn't change as a person, every relationship changed underneath me. And now it was more about another thing you said of what can Josh do for me?
It's a play. And it's not even intentional. It's just real. So I'm certified in Working Genius and do a lot of coaching around that assessment. It's Lencioni's new kind of assessment around process and how we think and productivity. And what we do when we do a team map of everybody's wiring on that is we always put the boss's name on the team twice, on the team map twice. And we don't say anything. We just say, hey, what do y'all notice about this? What are you seeing? And a lot of people are like, well, you made a mistake because, Josh's name's on there twice. The truth is your opinion weighs more than everybody else's. So your wiring is going to have more impact on the organization, the balance of the team, all of the guys. Just another reminder of, hey, there is a difference when you're the leader. Now, the other thing that I hear, and I used to fight against this, people will say, it's lonely at the top. And I don't disagree with that. But what I'd fight about is like, well, it's only lonely if you make it lonely, right?
Correct.
But here's what I've learned. And in the years of leading in good times and bad times, there is a truth to the loneliness, and the loneliness is what you felt during the pandemic. And when you said that I had 250 people that were waiting on, not necessarily waiting, but trusting me, is weight.
Leaning. I would say they're leaning on me, right?
Yeah.
For the vision, for the clarity, for the fact that we were going to be okay.
Yeah.
It was just a lean, right? And everyone's, because the uncertainty. Yeah, and it's a lot of, the more people that are there. So you think about, we talk about Matt Metzger here, who goes the leader of my church that I go to locally. I think there's over 5,000 people now.
Yeah.
So when I text him, like I'm cognizant that like there's probably hundreds or a lot of other people that need him.
So during that season though, for you, how many other people were feeling the weight that you were feeling?
None.
That's why it feels lonely. And it's not because you don't have friends. And it's not because some of your acquaintances or people that you worked with were your people, right? That were in your corner. I had times and kind of towards the end of my season at Catalyst, we were going through some tough stuff. I had a weight on my chest every morning I woke up that was almost debilitating because I was feeling something nobody else felt because I was sitting at the top. And so I think loneliness at the top is a combination of weight and just even the reality of every relationship has a different contract in it now. What I want to do is give you a place in life where you can talk about that weight, you can process that life with a safe group of usually it's not co-ed in our situation. We do it male and female because there's things you need to say in the company of just men and just women so that you feel safe to say the things you need to say. And what we've watched, this is what's been so powerful for us, Josh, is we get to the end, we've got all these testimonies. We've had 70 guys now go through our full year, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. That represents 1.3 million believers. So people ask us, like, how do you...
70 just think about that perspective. Like, I'm not going to do the quick math, but that's a lot of people responsible.
And imagine, though, if one of our guys, who, let's say he represents 20,000 of those people, has a fall or, dies by suicide, whatever an addiction, different piece.
Yeah, go into that. Go into the collateral damage because you've lived it with 3 friends, and there's other pastors that are going through stuff.
Even let's simplify it to something that probably many of these listeners have dealt with. An affair, a pastor has an affair. The amount of collateral damage to the faith family. Imagine that you came to faith through that pastor. There's a respect, there's an authority, there's a spiritual loyalty. There's so many emotions connected to that leader. even not even believing they're perfect. But how quickly do you all of a sudden start going, well, is everything they said a lie? Mm-hmm. Is God even real? What I try to teach staffs at churches when I go work with them is, just from a leadership perspective, is that you represent God to people, whether you believe it or not. I know that you might be working with kids and you're responsible for putting the goldfish in the rooms for the preschool. If you don't recognize that you are representing God to those people in how you lead, then you're missing the understanding you need to have.
And the responsibility
It's
that you
huge. In Life Giving Leader, which was my first book I wrote, I talk about this simple fact that I don't know people that have walked away from Jesus because of Jesus. But I know a slew of people that have walked away because of poor leadership in the church. Because that leadership reflects the God that they're trying to follow. So imagine a pastor who brought you to faith, who has been leading you, who you've been trying to implement their messages and their content. I know a lot of guys that, and I just say guys, I know a lot of leaders that can preach the paint off the wall. But if that same intensity doesn't match who you are as you lead your staff and how you care for people, that power of those words it's just going to start disintegrating. And so when I tell you, like, I've had plenty of chances to walk away from what we call the church and just go about and go into business, do whatever. I just can't. There's a calling in me that says, if Jesus loved the local church, then I do too. And I'm going to give it everything I can to make it better. And my unique seat on that is caring for its pastors and leaders. And man, you talk about spiritual warfare is crazy, because when you're going after the leaders of the church, so does somebody else. And you're signing up for it. But
so let's talk about that. So the direct attacks and unique attacks that pastors feel, because if you gotta think about this, if you're the devil, if you're the enemy, who are you going to go after? Right? You're going to go after someone that has no influence?
right.
You're going to have to go after, well, I have influence, but like even little old me, like I'm not leading a big church.
Yeah.
People may look at me as a leader and as a
Right.
Christian, but like, I don't know, just Joe Schmo down the street. If you're the devil, yeah, you're going to get some attacks, but they'll be mild in comparison to if I'm the devil, if I'm the enemy and I can affect someone that
Bang
affects.
for your buck, right?
Right, bang for your buck. If you can, like this dude over here, or the dude at Hillsong,
Yeah.
right? Well, regardless of what of that is true or not true, he had a fall.
Yeah.
And he influenced how many?
I mean, it's global.
It's global, right? Because his worship was
We're
done.
still singing every Sunday in almost every church in America. A Hillsong song is being played.
Correct. So like a fall like that, if you're the enemy, like you're going after those types of leaders.
Yeah. Which is why if you're not protecting yourself and paying attention to that, that's shame on you. Right? If you haven't put some safeguards in place, which for me and what we're trying to do is go in community, because there's going to be a thing that comes up that you need to say, I'm having these feelings and I don't know who I need to tell that to. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that, which most don't, what's crazy is a lot of the guys that we've watched in the news or whatever, they're the ones that wouldn't even do it even if they knew it was an option.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you are good, but we're trying to
Make sure you're good.
Yes. And, it's that question of, are you good really? Like that really is an important question.
Important word to the question.
It is. Yeah, exactly. So I would say this, and to back it up a little bit, the enemy's going to, what if the enemy comes after Joe Schmo to keep them from ever being influential? I think that can work too. Mm-hmm. Because if he can put insecurity, doubt, your history, your family, your whatever in your mind of, I can never amount, which I think if I'm honest with myself, that's what I was feeling those first couple of years, was complete insecurity and imposter. Like, why would you put me there? If I had allowed the enemies to let those truths, or those lies just start incubating even more. An example just a few weeks ago, it was something I was processing and something I was hoping was going to happen and it didn't. And part of what that was I had to take a hard look in the mirror and go, do I want to do what it takes to turn the narrative, to fix the story, to adjust this thing? And I remember telling my wife, I'm really grateful to a lot of these hard situations that I've had to walk through in life, because I have a resolve now that I've never had before. I have a lack of fear of trying something new. I failed an entrepreneurial test years ago because the church I was a part of, for their campus pastors, they were trying to do see how entrepreneurial you are to plant something, whatever. I failed it miserably. That little lie got in my head years ago that I'm not entrepreneurial. And I continued to back it with, well, I didn't grow up with this, or I didn't have this. I never saw this. Nobody showed me this. I don't know how to do this. Man, that stuff's out the window for me now. We built a nonprofit that incredible people are a part of now. And it came from a place of resolve, not a place of fear.
Yeah.
And I one thing I've just really grown to admire about you is even some of the hard things you've gone through have actually been turned to resolve, not fear.
Yeah, and by the way, that doesn't happen overnight. Thank you.
It's hurtful.
It's super hurtful. We're coming up on 2 years of probably my most painful experience, but it's a lot of work on yourself.
Yeah, it has to be.
And some of the hard things that I went through before then, also were repetition for the hardest thing, right? It's like little hits to get the big hit.
Right.
And again, these weren't big hits or little hits or big hits in a good way. They're in a negative way, but they are building that resolve and resiliency over time.
But my encouragement to you, Josh, is there's going to be a day in the next week where the enemy's going to throw a little thought in your mind of 2 years ago of, are you really different now, Josh? Of what if they come back? Of whatever. And what I want you to have is somebody to call in that moment.
Yeah.
And go, hey, I just need to tell you, this is what I'm hearing. And I know it's not true. I just need to say it out loud. What I try to do even in my life, during the season, what was the hardest, the darkest for me, I made a little decision that I would only listen to, and I know a lot of people are like, this is dumb, it's not me, but I would only listen to worship music before noon. Now, for those of you that are like, worship, really? I'm like, it's come so far. It's great. There's so much.
There's some really
it used
good
to
stuff
suck. Yeah. So I fully understand that. Here's why. And I'm the biggest Bon Jovi fan out there, but the truths of Bon Jovi songs are not anchoring in my soul. They're not going to keep me from wavering in the moments that I need. I wanted truths so deeply anchored in my spirit. Even, and a friend of mine, Lisa Turkirsch, used to say this. She said that feelings are indicators, not dictators. But we live in a world that allows our feelings to dictate what we do. But if I have truth anchored in the moments that I feel different, in the moments the circumstances look different than what I believe is true, that allows me to go, I'm going to pull what's true, not what I feel in this moment. And so that season I was going, I want to make sure there's a lot of truth sitting in this thing, because I know that I'm under a deep, deep attack. But I also, it's one of those little mixed bags, because I know a lot of people that see the devil around every corner. And I go, I don't see it that way. I think he's incredibly good at what he does. Mm-hmm. His ROI on who he attacks is very significant. But I also think he can look at the small person, quote unquote, the Joe Schmo, and keep them from stepping into the place that they have, simply from just putting a little, are you really supposed to do that thing? Mm-hmm. Are you really supposed to go serve those people? What do you have to offer them?
Well, and I think there's a correlation there, because Joe Schmo hasn't built the resolve, the resiliency, and had some of those successes in life, major or minor.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've spent a lot of my last 15 years calling out God's uniqueness in the people that. Yeah,
I actually wanted to compliment you on that, because earlier you said it. You stated your exact uniqueness. Yeah. You found that, and that's your passion, and that's superseding your doubts about entrepreneurship. Sure. Right. So
that comes from a lot of work, like we're talking about.
Well, it comes from a lot of work, but I just also want to point out that it is extremely important for people to do that work to find that uniqueness.
That's right.
Because if they don't, they end up meandering through life and do I really like this job? Do I really like what I'm doing in life? What am I doing here? Questioning life, right? Questioning their existence, questioning everything, versus I know my exact uniqueness. I'm living into it. Right. And it's not about money. It's not about this. It's about impact or whatever it may be. But they found it and they're living into it. Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about what you've just come out a month of talking about mental and emotional health, I think one of the most stabilizing things in my life is trusting that uniqueness. But I've had to go through, I had a leader one time tell me that if you're not successful, don't blame the organization. It's just your personality. Like that's like the opposite of a breakup, right? It's like, no, actually it is you. It's not me, it's you. But what he was, my unique wiring, my personality, my whatever was not like him. And for the life of him, he could not imagine me being a successful leader because he had a picture in his mind of what that looked like. And what I'm so grateful for, and actually the whole Life-Giving Leader book was written on this simple Psalm 139 concept. That God knit us together. We've heard that passage before. What's beautiful, though, is a few verses down, he says, he knit you together in your mother's womb. He knows you bit by bit, every part, while looking at the story that he has for you. But what we do is we disconnect and we go, why did you give me that unique, weird thing? Why am I wired like this? Why do I love numbers? Why do I love this? And what we've done is we've disconnected this bigger calling, this bigger story that God, why in the world would he give you a unique personality that doesn't fit in the calling or the story?
Yeah.
So the quicker we can connect those things and become proud of that uniqueness and quit chasing everybody else's uniqueness, I think that's one of the challenges of social media.
Yeah.
Is we're looking at everybody else's uniqueness, coveting it, wanting it, going, well, if I'm going to be a good pastor, I need to be like blank. And God's going, no, actually, I have a different spot for you pastoring. And when I stepped in to lead something I didn't start, I think the number one thing we try to do is be the person before us quite often.
Yeah.
And you're going, no. That's not who was called to lead here. You are. You got the job. You got the responsibility. You got to pick in. You got to step into that space. You try to do it like them, you lose. Mm-hmm. Everybody loses.
Yep.
So there's an honoring that's required, but there's also a stepping in of your uniqueness. So
there's something that's so good. There's something, before I forget, that you mentioned about the pastors and people looking up to them, putting them on a pedestal. Yeah. They're humans. And we do this they're humans first, yes. And we do this with politicians as well. And we do this with people in Hollywood. And we put all these people on a pedestal and forget that, or the NFL, I mean, name your thing.
Right.
But we put them on a pedestal and forget that they're humans.
Yep.
Like we do that with the NFL. Like I wrote a thing after DeMar Hamlin went down. Yeah. And that was, as a former football player, that was really hard to see. And for a lot of people, and I couldn't imagine, I was putting myself on the field with them as a teammate and couldn't imagine what they were going through. And I was like, there's no way they can go back on that field. Yep. But I wrote the next day, is like, that was a human first on the field. Yep. And his family saw that. Yep. And we look at NFL players like modern day gladiators because in some ways they are. Sure. They're like just there for our entertainment. I mean, the biggest, fastest, right, muscle-bound dudes on the planet.
I get it.
Beating each other.
Similar to that. That's probably what you thought when you first met me.
I was thinking Tyler Reagin, biggest, fastest, strongest.
Gladiator. That was the gladiator. Word that came to mind. I did hit a few good drives yesterday.
Yeah, you actually hit some drives that look gladiator-esque. But besides that, I was just writing like, hey, they're human first. Right. And so same thing with the pastors, as you mentioned. I had this beautiful conversation with my 7-year-old daughter the other night. I was out grilling, and the dude that sued me, that we just end up, I can talk about this now. So it's interesting. He moved to our side of town, moved his family to our side of town, just down the road, and now put his girls at our girls' dance studio where they've been. So we've had to see them over. And she was asking me about the kids and whatever. And I was like, look, the kids had nothing to do with this. Like, you be nice. And she's like, Daddy, why is he bad? Like, why does he do that? Like in 7-year-old tone. I was like, well, we're all sinners, honey. Yeah. And like, we all struggle with certain things.
Yeah. It comes from somewhere.
It comes from somewhere, right? And for him, I think it's childhood trauma, and he's still dealing with that. So it's interesting. I've had to be counseled on this. Yeah. I've found myself over this 2-year thing, having more empathy for him than I did for myself. Wow. And I've had some people speak truth into my life, because they're like, you seem to be doing really good with how you are with him. How are you doing for you? I was like, yeah, probably not as good. Yeah. And so having those conversations is important. But she goes on, my 7-year-old goes on to say, so to asking about sin. Why does God know we're going to sin? Yeah. And I said, he does. And I saw the confused face on her, and I was like, but he gives us the choice. Right. He knows what we're going to do, but
Yeah.
he gives us the choice to do what's right. And then she goes, why? Right? Why?
Right.
Like, okay, I don't know how far I can go. I don't know if I'm this good. Like, thinking like, good
Hold on,
at
I need to turn
doing
the stakes.
I was like, hey, honey, come help me. I need to start asking her more.
Right.
But I was like, it's because of free will.
Yeah.
He doesn't want slaves that just bow to him.
Yeah.
He wants us to follow him for
Yeah.
what's right. So it was just a beautiful conversation with a 7-year-old, come from like a real life scenario that we could talk about biblically. And that's part of the reason that we have them in a Christian school to learn this foundation.
That's right.
And where our strength comes from, not from ourselves, not from society, not from a phone, not from these people we put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
But my point started with the pastors being put on a pedestal as they're humans.
Yeah.
So regardless if that person brought you to Christ, that person is still a sinner, saved by the grace of God, just like you.
Well, and the platform of the lights might look different, but they're still a platform of lights.
Yeah.
And so that's enticing to a lot of people. I think the ones that stay in the game, the ones that do it for a lifetime, do it and continually take themselves off that pedestal. Right?
Yeah.
But it's hard, man. It becomes identity. It becomes everybody, like I'm known for that. I'm working with one church right now where the pastor is really wrestling. It's time he's ready to retire, needs to retire. It's probably a little overdue. And he doesn't have anything else. So now you're not just giving up a day-to-day office thing.
It's very similar to business owners, entrepreneurs, by the way, too.
It is.
They
There's
don't
a
build
reason
any
they
other
can't
hobbies.
hand them over very well.
Yeah.
Because it's identity. It's not job. I mean, that's a piece of it. I like what I do. That's not, it's who I am.
Yeah.
And I tell leaders a lot, even if you leave a job to go to a better job, you need to take a minute and grieve, because you're no longer that person. You're the same person. You know what I mean? But your identity has changed.
No, I went through that. I did.
Yes.
Yeah, so did you.
And you have to, I remember leaving when I left the church to go work for Catalyst. I'd worked at a church. I had the same role for 8 years. So when I would see people in the neighborhood or at dinner or whatever, I had to recognize that's not me anymore. They would be like, how's that going? Well, that's not what I do anymore. There's an identity shift. Do you see what I mean?
No, I had
You're feeling it.
Well, I'm feeling it because I went through it, right? It's
Right.
like I had to grieve who I was. Like
And it's not wrong. Like you might go into a better thing, but if you don't take, it'll get you when you're not.
doesn't feel like that in the time,
right?
But almost every instance, if you keep moving in the direction that God's calling, it is a better thing. But I had this person say this to me, and I don't even bring up the company's name that I used to work for that much, but I'm going to because it means something to the story. They go, wait. You are Northwestern Mutual. You're the man. You were like, how could they fire you? You
Right.
are like. I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
I was like, and I was in that moment of like, because they were just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Because I owned the business. I was like, yes, I owned it, and they had to buy me out. But like, they had this right to terminate
I'm a
me
broker
as well,
in a sense, right?
Right. So it's just interesting that other people's perspective in your identity and your own perspective in your identity. And here's one of the biggest epiphanies I wrote on the year anniversary. And then this actually got a lot of attention because I was very clear on it. It wasn't the thing that I clung to, but it was one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, if you wrap your identity in or have any other idol outside of God, he will redirect your focus, sometimes forcibly.
Yep.
And I think
It's a good word.
that part of it for me was that my identity in who I was as a managing
sure.
partner and owner of that firm and even that company, because I had been around it since I was 9 months old, was part of my identity, and God needed to redirect my focus.
Yeah. And how do you feel now? I don't know you at all in that context.
Yeah.
That's got to be a little weird too, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what are your emotions with that? Is that a great thing? Is that a weird thing? Is it something like you want? I want to tell you more about that. I know there was a lot of pain there, but you understand what I mean? Like now you're getting new relationships that have no context for that. And yet for your whole life, that was a part of your identity.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I actually thought through that, because there's a lot of relationships I've created in the last year and a half, 2 years that only know that what I've told them about that. Right. And so that's an interesting thought.
Well, and the beautiful part moving forward, Josh, is that they don't care, not because they don't care about you. It's actually because they care about you.
Yeah. It is beautiful. And one of the things I have thought of, and it is would be the part of the book, is like, look, what if the worst thing that's ever happened to you is actually the best thing?
Great.
And all you got to do is trust God's plan.
Yeah. I will tell you, man, as I walked through my season of really difficult days, that was true. And what I watched is there were 4 specific times that I was like, God, if you don't open this door today, I'm not going to make it. And he didn't. All 4 times. Every no was an upgraded yes. And if I'd gotten a yes the first one, the upgrades down the road were way inferior.
Right.
But that requires an anchoring of truth. It requires a trust that maybe, just maybe, God does have better plans for us than we have for ourselves. But I don't believe, that's my point of anchoring truth down in here, right? Is because there are going to be days you're going, heck no, you don't.
Yeah.
Because right now what I'm going through sucks. It's the worst thing I can imagine. 2 years later, you're going, there were days I couldn't see straight. And now there are days I see very straight going, God has something new for me. Unfortunately, he had to break an identity in the middle of that. One of my close friends had to go through, he had a coach that took him through a literal funeral service for his old identity.
Wow.
Because he couldn't get past it. And he will tell you to this day, that was one of the most impactful things that's ever happened to him. And
I can imagine that'd be intense. Like, no, I don't want it. That sounds corny. That sounds cheesy. And then
it works.
Yeah, it works. All right. So wrapping up here, I want to keep us on track. You talked a little bit about it, and I know Craig Groeschel's brilliant at this. What systems, because I think what's true for pastors could also be true for anyone.
Yeah.
Can you set up to safeguard against the enemy?
Yeah.
Like Craig Groeschel, I heard him on an interview with Ed Milet talking about how his team or his wife have access to his whereabouts at any time. GPS on him. He doesn't do certain things with his phone. He doesn't have certain apps on his phone. Like, he has got it seemingly from the outside looking in, dialed in to safeguard the shit out of him against the enemy's attacks.
Yeah. Craig is, I'll tell you this, we talked about this earlier, how sometimes you meet people and you've read their stuff or you've heard their talks and then you go, he's the opposite of that. The closer you get to Craig Groeschel, the more you respect Craig. He's a close friend. I've spent a lot of life with Craig. There are very few humans that I would do anything you know what I mean? He is one of the best overall people I've ever been around. And there's a reason he gets success in his words and the things, because he does what he says he's going to do. Andy's the same way, Andy Stanley. I can't say enough of how much I respect those guys. And I've been around them for a long time, and I've seen them when they're not in charge and they're not on stage and they're living it out. Craig's number one life mission is not pastoring. It's being a husband and a dad. The pastoring comes after that. And Amy would tell you that's his number one mission. His kids would tell you that. And so he's earned that with them. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He's one of the most disciplined people I know. And discipline, what we're talking about. He has recognized, and here's what happens. If you don't put systems in place at a church of 200 when you're the pastor, you're not going to put them in place at a church of 20,000. He has from day one said, I need to protect myself. No matter what. Even if he stayed at 200. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think what happens though is we all go, well, one day I'll get to that place. Then I'll do a budget.
Then I'll have to worry about it.
Then I'll have to worry about it. No, he's had these disciplines in place from day one because he recognized there's too much riding on this. Number one being my wife, my marriage, and my family, right? And so he does. And now, granted, as he's grown in influence, he's done more and more. But part of he would tell you his physical fitness is a spiritual exercise for him, because he believes if he can be healthy physically, it is a God-honoring thing to do, one. But two, it's going to help protect him in these hard seasons. He's going to be in better condition to do that. Mm-hmm. So, I think for most guys, what I would tell them is, like, number one, if you don't have a place to say all of it, then that's number one on the list. And then the other things we do with our guys too is we're going to do blood work. We're going to we want to make sure you're healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's crazy. You and I've talked about this, how much physical unhealth will impact all the other unhealth, right?
Yep.
So you got to do the work, and the work is hard sometimes. But if you do it in a community of people that say, we're with you, we're going to do the work with you, and we actually really care about you, and we don't care what you do for us. It's just a magic combination to be able to kind of grow and move forward. And Craig has absolutely 100% influenced me as a model of how to fight for discipline in all areas. I do not fight for it as hard as he does when it comes to diet and exercise, and I need to. That's his. For him, it's something he loves too. For me, it's something I do. Right?
But does he love it, or did he learn to love it?
He would probably say learned, but in the same way that you grew up training and you work, like there's something in it you love. I know you're doing it for benefit of your body, your life, your health, but there's a piece of you that loves that exercise and that working out and that training and what it does for your body.
Maybe it's the way I look in the mirror.
That could be a piece of it.
But whether that's vain or not, I think, yeah, right. So there's pieces of that. You're
Absolutely.
right.
And there's a lot that don't like that.
Yeah.
That they don't cross that hurdle because there's not an intrinsic enjoyment of what the betterment piece of that, right?
Right.
So he definitely does, and he loves it, and he would make me do push-ups with him, and I would do 2, and he would do 400. So, but yeah, man, it's, you know what? It's, even if you're a business leader and you're leading 5 people right now, how you steward that 5 people is your leadership journey.
Yeah.
That's the simplest way to understand it. And how you take care of yourself is going to impact how those people are taken care of.
Yeah.
And Craig knows that. And so that's why, yes, there's a whole lot more writing on it. And a lot of these people we've mentioned, we've all been close to. I think one of the biggest challenges for me is when there are pastors that hit the news for pick the subject. Those are friends. They're not just a face. And when you recognize what they walk through, my encouragement, if you're a part of a church, is what you said earlier. Recognize their people. At the same time, it's okay to hold them to a standard. It's part of the calling.
Yeah.
But just recognize their people. And you can respect them without putting them in a position that they have an unfair amount of expectation on them. Right? So it's a two-way street when it comes to that. And we're just trying to keep people healthy, man. Keep them in the game.
I think that what people need to, those of you listening right now, what you need to ask yourself is, where do you struggle? Where does the enemy try to attack you? Because those are the places that you need to ask for help. Listening on Craig Rochelle, he has some great, actual tactical things. Literally his assistant and I believe his wife both have an app that show his GPS.
Every time.
As to where he's going, where he's at. It's interesting. You don't think about it oh, that's nanny say. Well, no. He has influence over possibly millions.
Right.
With the books, millions. It's millions. With the books he's written, his podcasts, his church, his following, YouTube channel. Yeah, it's probably millions. So he knows what's riding on it, and you got to know what's riding on it too. Even if it's just one, even if you're a single parent, it's just one. You got a lot riding on that too. So make sure that you're figuring out where the enemy's trying to attack you and set in some safeguards. And it starts, as Tyler mentioned, with having people you can confide in to tell the real. And you actually have to actively seek those. Yeah. You can't be passive in that. Be like, well, my best friend didn't show up today. Yeah. They didn't just magically appear. God didn't just put them in my life. You actually have to. That way. Yeah, that's not how it works. Just like when you're in grade school and you were new to school or whatever, you got to go out and seek to have a conversation, ask some questions, start building block by block. That's right. That's right, man. This has been such a good conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Love having you here. Yeah. We'll have to do it again. And for those of you, hey, Tyler has built his career by building others up. So we're going to build Tyler up a little bit today. How can they follow you on social media?
Instagram is probably easiest. That's my favorite. Just at Tyler Reagin, Reagin.
Reagin. He's wearing a goofy hat in his profile picture.
Oh, yeah. You didn't like it, huh? That's not your jam?
I'm just saying it's kind of a goofy hat. Oh, wow, I'm not saying I might look good in that hat. I've never tried one on.
Goofy doesn't necessarily imply something that you like.
Yeah, take it how you will. You guys be the judge. You look at Tyler's hat and see if he looks good in or better in a ball cap like he's at today.
One of my favorite hats is a good Stetson open road. So it's not a true cowboy hat, but it's got a little bit. We call it a cowbro hat.
That's Athens, Georgia. Ty, yeah. That's not true South.
That's all right.
Yeah.
We live in Orlando now, so that's not the South at all. But
yeah.
We still bring that in there. So.
Well, follow Tyler. How else can they connect with you?
That's probably the best way. You can go to the Life 1010 Project, which is our pastor's thing. You can go to it's the number 10 word 10 project.com.
If someone's close with a pastor that's not a part of that, can they connect?
100%.
Okay.
And if you go to the website, you see our highlights. You kind of hear a little bit more of the story, but you can't just sign up. You have to just connect with Josh and I, and we do a conversation that kind of lets us determine whether that person is a good fit for what we're doing.
Okay.
We only have so many spots, so we're not picky in the sense of we're not letting people in. It's just we want to make sure that they're going to invest what we're investing. It's a big investment, and you got to be willing to go there. So, but 1010project.com is the best place to do that. And all my coaching and consulting and stuff is at the Life Giving. I think it's just lifegiving.co.
Okay. And he's got books there on Amazon as well.
Yeah.
So look him up. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure you share the show. And as always, remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.